Since its introduction with Module 16, the Barbarian Tank has been that sore underdog, the worst of the worst with regards to tanks. And there's only 3 tank classes in the game: the Paladin, Fighter, and the Barbarian. And with one of them performing so poorly that barely anybody can actually play it, meant that one of the 3 tank classes was just not being really played, and thus leading to an even more shortage in tanks. So with Module 27, the Barbarian Tank specifically is getting a lot of updates. In this video, we're going to cover a whole bunch of changes to Barbarian in general, some Blade Master changes, that's the damage dealing side, and then the Sentinel changes. And on top of that, their threat changes and how that actually looks and how it's going to help with regards to their current threat generation, making them a lot more viable and competitive, making it a lot more easier to actually tank on this class. So first of all, we're going to start with some general changes. So this affects the tank path and the Blade Master path, as they do share some powers. I'm not going to go through this in depth. You can refer to these changes yourself in game. You can always access the preview server if you have a PC. But Rage has been changed a bit, so at-wills generate a bit more, dailies generate a good bit more, and encounter powers ever so slightly less. The Bounding Slam at-will, the Gap Closer, just a bit of increase to its damage and the radius of the area of effect, and it can now proc weapon enchantments. The Crescendo daily power going up to 2200 magnitude, with then the most notable change to Trample of the Fallen. It will no longer increase your damage when you use a control power. It will now apply a 3% damage taken debuff to the target whenever you hit them with a control power. This damage debuff only applying to at-wills, encounters, and daily powers, and you can read that with the updated change just here. This means that both the Blade Master or the Sentinel can use this to support the team. I would assume that 3% buff can benefit everybody who attacks the target. It still has the deal 10% more damage to controlled enemies. Then for the damage dealer specifically, the Battle Rage, the damage boost has gone from 20% up to 25%. However, if you use the Relentless Battle Rage feat, that damage boost is only 15%, which is a 1% increase from 14%. But if you really play Blade Master seriously, you'll note that you can't really make use of escalating rage in most fights. It's just not reliable. Relentless Battle Rage, far better, even with this little bit of an increase to the damage while you're in rage. Hidden Daggers getting adjusted up there, having decreased magnitude. However, it now can be cast twice and a much lower cooldown. It might help a little bit with AoE damage. Axe Storm adjusted its targeting, so now it shouldn't fly off randomly, and the magnitude did get increased a little bit. And then the Indomitable Rage feat also got increased up to 1200. So just some nice adjustments there, but again, I don't really see any of these impacting the DPS too much, other than that general change to Trample of the Fallen. But then we go to the Sentinel changes, of which there are a lot. You can see here with Block and Unstoppable, you'll now properly gain the 60% absorption ratio when you're blocking while within Unstoppable, and also using, let's say, Sentinel Slash to block. Your block, however, will no longer generate a burst of action points, resulting in significantly less action point regeneration from animation cancelling, and the block animations have been changed, which is kind of nice. I like them. Basically, when you stand still, this is your block animation. When you move forward, this is your block animation, and standing still, it's like this after moving forward. When you move backwards, it's like this, and when you stand still, it's like this, and when you move side to side, it's like this. So you have this unique block animation depending on your movement and how you have positioned yourself, which is pretty neat. But then the at-will Challenger Slash has got its magnitude increased to 30. That's their main threat at-will, so that's nice. The Sentinel Slash at-will, the AP gain being reworked. You won't be abusing that to get insane amounts of action point regen anymore. The minimum magnitude gone up and the maximum magnitude gone up significantly. It can be worth to charge it up. If you need to block an attack anyway, you can use that to block while charging it up. So action economy, because it now deals decent damage. The Primal Fury encounter power. It has been adjusted so that when you use it during Unstoppable, you will now immediately end Unstoppable. This used to be tied to a specific feat. But the minimum magnitude has gone up to 200 and the maximum magnitude decreased to 600. You'll see why they kind of needed to do that. The Furious Reaction feature, they're changing it from 15 rage and 5% damage for 20 seconds to 10 rage and a 10% heal over 10 seconds. It will now trigger whenever your stamina drops below a low threshold and no longer gains unusable rage during Unstoppable. Don't see that being used all too much, but yeah, it has that neat effect there. And otherwise, the Raging Blade Turn feature has gone from 10% deflect to 5% deflect and 5% critical avoidance at maximum rage. Pretty good. Critical avoidance, more reliable. Then on my second part here, we have Frustrating Slash feat. The duration has gone down to 5 seconds from 10. That is because it's actually obtained a significant increase to its threat generation, which we'll cover just after these powers. Leap into Action feat, same increased threat thing, but it's actually been increased to 10 seconds, which means it has a much higher uptime as it is tied to an encounter power. That makes sense. The Sure Slam feat has been removed and replaced with On the Move. So On the Move is now here instead of being over here, which we can see with the other changes to feats means we have a new feat. But On the Move slightly increases not so fast magnitude, and the Swift effect now prefers players over, let's say, companions. The Disarming Takedown feat, the debuff has been reduced to 5% instead of 10%, but it will now stack with other physical vulnerability debuffs, and it can now be applied at all times, not just during Unstoppable. Very good, but you have to take a feat for that, and what you are giving up is the new feat, which increases the takedown's threat. Before this change, takedown used to just have increased threat all the time, it just didn't say it, but now they're splitting it to be a feat. So you're going to have to either take the team support one or the extra threat. It's going to be a balance of what you can sacrifice, which is nice. Crushing Advance, the damage dealt debuff is now 10% instead of 5%, and it was stacked with other damage dealt debuffs, so you'll reduce the enemy's damage. And the Blood Fury feat, its now effect of ending Unstoppable has been removed. That's become a core part of Primal Fury, as we said. It now decreases the rage cost of Primal Fury by -10, so your Primal Fury would be 30 instead of 40. Which means you can pump out more of them. And the Indomitable Might feat, the maximum magnitude goes from 900 to 1000, making it a little bit better for threat. Now there has been some additional proposed changes, which are pretty cool. We can see them here, and they may be coming. So we might get a mechanic where by default you gain 10% deflect and 10% deflect severity. That will just be a mechanic sitting here giving you those free 20% stats. I think Barbarian could use that. Inspiring Bravado feat. This would replace your Undying Instinct feat, this one here. But it would now give Battle High, the daily power, the ability to increase the hit points of all nearby allies by 15%. Basically making it a mitigation daily. And when you use Block during Unstoppable, you'll gain 15% critical avoidance. Again, these are all maybe coming. They're still in development and being discussed whether they'll be added. But you can see that here. Unarmored Defense. Your Shredding Washboard abs give you 10% deflect and deflect severity. A work in progress. Inspiring Bravado. Battle High giving that 15% extra hit points to your teammates. And then Block having that added effect of 15% critical avoidance when you use it during Unstoppable. I think those would be some great additions. But now let's move to the actual threat of the Sentinel. How has that been changed with regards to the increased threat and what powers you should effectively be using and how it's basically made Barbarian a ton more viable despite those changes not really having that much of an impact that we just discussed. Well, we can see all the new threat modifiers here from what they were to what they are now. The base threat massively increased, so all your damage is now multiplied by 1500% with regards to threat, instead of just 550%. However, that does come with a reduction to your other threat abilities that had increased threat, like Challenger Slash down to 300% from 800, same with Takedown, same with Primal Fury. However, the Threatening Presence feature has gone from just plus 50% to plus 500% to your base. That is massive. That means your base would go up to 2000%. The Frustrating Slash and the Leap into Action have also gone from like plus 25% and plus 50% to plus 500%. This means if you have Threatening Presence plus Frustrating Slash active all the time, which you can maintain by making sure you cast Sentinel Slash every 5 seconds to keep this up and just have this ability slotted, and your base threat is now 2500%. On top of that, you can increase it by a further 500% if you use Rage and Rally. So that's the threat modifiers there, and that's just a massive increase across the board because of that base threat and the ability to increase the base threat with Threatening Presence, Frustrating Slash, and Rage and Rally if you choose to do so, up to 3000. But what this means with regards to the actual powers you'll be using and the effective magnitudes on them. So for example, Challenger Slash, it has increased threat. This basically, you can just multiply the magnitude by that and you can see then how much magnitude damage it would deal versus something else. So we look at that right here. You can see Challenger Slash, before it was 1100 magnitude. Now it's 1350 magnitude. But if you use Threatening Presence plus Frustrating Slash, that's 2250 magnitude. That is double what it was before. That is just huge. Sure Strike now becomes a decent option to use if you way prefer that animation. Before it was only 330 magnitude, now it's 900. And again with Threatening and Frustrating, you get that to 1500. It's just, I find, yes, I like the animation a lot better of Sure Strike. However, Challenger Slash is that bit better for threat, and they regenerate your rage at about the same rate. For me, while animation cancelling both of them, I was getting my rage full, the meter, within 26 seconds. You can test for yourself if you can get better than that. But it was exactly the same with both while animation cancelling. What I would like them to add is stamina regeneration to Sure Strike. That would make it comparable to what the Paladin has with Shielding Strike. Now Primal Fury, on its minimum, if you're at full stamina and you use Primal Fury, it has the minimum magnitude. If you have no stamina left, it has its maximum magnitude. So we can see the effective magnitudes of them with the increased threat. Before it was only 4400 on minimum. Now it's 9000 on minimum. But if you use Threatening plus Frustrating, it's now 15,000 on minimum. Massive. And the maximum has gone up to 45,000. That is just insane. The best the Paladin can get is 18,000 magnitude on their Templar's Wrath. Primal Fury you can use an awful lot more, maybe not as rapidly one after another, but if you manage to drain your stamina and use Primal Fury, that is worth 2.5 Templar's Wraths. That is just huge. 45,000 effective magnitude. So you should not have any problems with threat if you can drain your stamina. But you could still use other abilities, like Takedown. That, with its increased threat, has gone up to 30,000 effective magnitude, versus before it was only 17,600. Indomitable Battle Strike, if you want to use that. With Threatening and Frustrating, it's now up to 25,000 magnitude, whereas before it was only nearly 5,000. And then you'll probably use Punishing Charge and Savage Advance as well. Punishing Charge, just over 16,000 magnitude there with those effects. Savage Advance, up to 45,000 magnitude with those effects. And you can see what it was before, drastically lower, because those abilities don't have increased threat. But now with your base being increased by like ×3, you can see the difference. It's just huge, along with now the ability to increase your base threat even further with Threatening Presence and Frustrating Slash reliably to that 2500. So Sentinel threat is pretty much solved. And if you want to go a high threat setup, you'll be using your Challenger Slash, your Sentinel Slash to maintain the buff of Frustrating, Primal Fury, Takedown, and most likely Punishing Charge for your Hard Taunt here. If you don't need the Hard Taunt, need more extra threat, you could go Indomitable. That would be the next best for threat because of the damage, and you take that feat here. But if you need survivability, you're probably going to be switching out Takedown. I wouldn't do that at the start of the fight. Just secure your threat and then switch out Takedown later, because you kind of need the low cooldown to regenerate Rage in order to cast more Primal Fury. when you just look at it all as well, it could be pretty viable to also go like Indomitable, Punishing, and Takedown, and end up with some pretty decent threat from the beginning with Rage of Rally, forgetting about Primal Fury and not having to mess with that stamina. I'll do an analysis of that later, and possibly for other tanks as well. What you be kind of using for high threat at the beginning of a fight. It's all a balancing act, and that's not changing. You will still have to choose between team support, extra threat, and survivability. That is the core of playing a tank. It's all a balance and finding what you're most comfortable with the setup. But at least Barbarian now has the capability of a much higher threat ceiling. You should not have any problems. And with some extra abilities going to be added, like unarmored defense, inspiring bravado, and the crit avoidance on block, that can add to their survivability and their team support, which will be really nice. I hope those three do get added. With that said, hopefully this has been somewhat insightful for you guys. Barbarian Tank specifically looking in a very good shape for the next module launch. Again, this is coming with module 27. It's still in open development on the public test server, where we bounce feedback to the devs and they consider it and so on and so forth. So we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.